Sitting on the beach near the seaside city of Tecalutla, a luxurious house surrounded by lots of greenery stood in a small alley. Two iron gates blocked off a trail to the luxurious building and its giant garage. A large room rested on the second floor, stretching out of the side of the home, and inside this large room slept a young man named Cesar Cabello. He tossed and turned in his bed, but couldn't get comfortable, almost to the point where it felt useless trying to ignore the sunlight that beamed through the blinds of the window. On the back of the front door of his room there was a poster of a Mexican superhero posing in heroic fashion. His arms were on his hips, and he looked off to the distance, while standing on a cliff with the name Captain Ocelot written under him in bold yellow and black letters. On another wall was a bulletin board with pictures of Cesar in different locations and environments, various notes, newspaper articles on unexplained events, and documents. Mounted on a wall was a curved 55-inch television with a dresser drawer under it. Next to the dresser was a small mountain of clothes within a white hamper, which was neighbored by a gaming chair with a red hoodie rested on the back of it. As Cesar closed his eyes, trying his hardest to return to his slumber, he felt something lick his cheek, the tongue of an animal. The rough bumps on its tongue scraped against Cesar's face, leaving a patch of saliva behind. "Good morning to you too," he greeted the beast. A creature that wasn't quite natural greeted him back with a bark. It was a cross between a dog and a dinosaur, with hind legs that resembled that of a feline. The animal raised its blue-colored body with black stripes onto the bed and began wagging its tail. The dinosaur-like skull, red eyes, jagged upper jaw, and pointed ears all made the animal seem threatening to others. But Cesar knew the truth, as he began petting the small pointed chain of plates protruding from its spine, which extended to form a short tail. Although the creature had similar features to a canine, the tag on its collar still read Jackie, as if it was just a normal Earth dog. The three-toed beast jumped off the bed as its owner pulled off the covers, wearing the same red shirt and sweatpants as he wore last night. "You hungry, girl?" Cesar asked Jackie as he climbed out of the bed, as the canine-like animal began to grind her teeth against one of the legs of the bed. "Come on," Cesar stated, sliding the door open before seeing the dog trot out of the bedroom and into the hallway. Cesar walked down the curving corridor, rubbing his eyes with Jackie padding by his side, panting in excitement due to her hunger. He rolled up his sleeve, looking at his watch. The device had a red band with some black trimming along the sides, and red accents going around the faceplate. Cesar slightly turned the silver bezel, activating the watch face to turn on, showing a black faceplate with two red stripes, forming an outline of an hourglass symbol, with the time 6:57 in a small font at the bottom near the dial. Lowering his wrist to his side, the boy stopped by a room to his left, then knocked on a door before holding his ear to the surface. He was cautious, not wanting to barge into the room. He regretted the last time he did. "Yuri?" Cesar questioned, knocking on the handleless door. "Yuri, you up?" Cesar asked. After not getting an answer, he placed his hand on the tablet that was planted on the wall next to the door. As the green line trailed down the tablet, the device scanned his handprint before sounding off a light beep, causing the door to slide open. No one was there. Nothing but a large bed, a desk with a computer on it, a nightstand, and dressers with various textbooks resting on top of them. Cesar tapped the screen on the wall, causing the door to slide back, shutting the room, then continued down the hall, Jackie in tow. "Basil?" Cesar announced, arriving in the kitchen. "Good morning, Cesar." A disembodied voice stared over the couch. "Where's Yuri?" Cesar asked, crouching down and opening a cabinet with a large tin can. "Miss Kang left an hour early for work," the house responded. Cesar sighed, picking up the tin can and dragging it over to the large dog bowl near the center counter as Jackie frantically tried to get inside the can. "Easy, girl, calm down," Cesar replied before taking the top of the can, revealing a multitude of meats, which smelly aroma hit him like a bus. Cesar poured some of the food into the dog bowl, then lifted it back up before watching Jackie rush over and begin to eat it. "Would you like me to set up transportation for you, Cesar?" Basil asked. No, I'm okay," Cesar replied, placing the lid back on the can and putting it back to the cabinet before closing the door. After brushing his teeth, taking a shower, and completing his morning routine, Cesar headed into the garage wearing a red button-down shirt with a black vest over it, black jeans, and sneakers that looked exclusively for him. Cesar's sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, showing the watch on his left wrist. Arriving in the garage, Cesar looked at the cars that were there to choose from. In a moment of hesitation, Cesar grabbed the left sleeve of his shirt, thinking about using an alternate way to get to where he was going. He stopped himself before grabbing the keys that were hanging by a hook on the wall and approached an Audi R8 Spider with red racing stripes. After getting in the car, he snapped his seatbelt in place and turned the car on as the garage door began to rise. After adjusting the rearview mirror, then drove down the path towards the exit as the gates in front of the house opened automatically. Inside the city of Puerto Caballero, a giant building which connected to a laboratory below stood above all the others. This building was called Cabello Tower. Cesar drove to this building, parking in a reserved space, and headed in. Walking through the revolving doors, Cesar arrived into the main hall of the building, passing by the front desk. "Hey Travis," he said, walking past the receptionist. "Afternoon, Cesar," the man at the desk replied. Cesar headed towards the elevator, waiting for the pulley to rise back up. Once it did, he entered the see-through contraption and pressed the button to head up towards the highest level. The main hall of the building began to shrink as he raced with the platform. After the elevator stopped and the doors opened, Cesar entered a hallway leading straight towards two large double doors. He entered them, arriving in a large circular room with the carpeting resembling his watch face, but with the white hourglass symbol and the rest of the carpet being black. There was a desk with a red swivel chair sitting in front of a large window that overlooked the city. Cesar approached the window, hearing the sirens of police cars blaring in the distance below. With a smile on his face, he clenched his left fist before raising it up as his watch activated itself as if it could read his mind, and preparing his right hand to turn the bezel. Just before he could, though, a woman with dark hair that went to her shoulders, wearing a black-fitting outfit and long sleeves, a holster on her waist and housed a gun, and a zipper that went from her neck to her chest, and black pants with steel-toed boots, entered the office, nearly barging in. "Finally, you're here," she stated. Cesar turned around. "Yeah, not for long. I was just gonna head out," he said. "Head out where exactly?" the woman questioned with authority. "You don't hear the sirens?" Cesar replied. The woman sighed. "You do understand how crazy the board went when they were informed that a 20-year-old was taking care of a company that's been helping the city stand tall for years?" Cesar nodded. "Kate, She suddenly cut him off before she could say anything. "No. The police can do their job just as well as you do. What if it's an alien? They'll need me." Kate shook her head. "No, they won't, because they'll have me. You, on the other hand, have work to do," she said, walking over to the door. "They're waiting for you in the other room," Kate added, opening the door for Cesar and gesturing him to go through. Cesar sighed, placing his hands on the desk. "Do I really have to do this?" Cesar questioned. "Do you really want the answer to that question?" Kate replied. "Just tell them what they want to hear." Cesar walked out of his office, down the hall, then took a left, entering a conference room with Kate alongside him. There were men and women sitting around a long table with a monitor sitting on the wall at the end of the room, with Kate standing guard at the door. Cesar walked past at the elongated table, passing by the individual sitting down before stopping at the end of the table. He looked down and placed his hands on the chair that was obviously meant for him. Cesar looked at the back of the room, looking at Kate, seeing her nod in support. "I'm just gonna stand up here if that's okay," Cesar said, pulling the chair up to the table. "So, what are we here for again?" "Mr. Cabello, we're here because there's adolescents in charge of a countrywide industry," a businessman with a bald head and scruffy beard said, sitting on the left of Cesar. "Now, your father had the best intentions for the city and beyond. But what about you? How can you take the next step? What do you think is best for the city?" the man added. Cesar opened his mouth to reply, then paused with hesitation. "I am what's best for the city," Cesar replied. "A few months ago, America was faced with something inhuman. But I'll be damned if something like that happened here," he added. "And what makes you so sure something like that won't happen?" the man questioned. Cesar glared at the man with determination in his greenish-brown eyes. "Because you've got me here." A woman with dark hair in a suit folded her hands. "Mr. Cabello, cockiness isn't a weapon." "I don't know. From my experience, it kinda can be," he said with a wink. The woman raised her eyebrow as the room grew silent. "Lo siento. Force of habit," he said before clearing his throat. "There are projects left behind by your father, including alien armor and nanotechnology. What do you plan on doing with those?" the woman asked. Cesar thought for a moment before responding. We won't make weapons here. Not anymore. We make peace, he replied. Says the boy with the alien device he uses as a weapon, the woman replied as a tall man in a blue suit, white shirt, and black tie quietly stepped inside the room and stood next to Kate. Cesar continued trying to counter the responses from the businesswoman. I used it to... The young man stammered, struggling to come up with an educated response, but nothing was coming out. I think what Cesar is trying to say is that we as a country face various other obstacles unlike the rest of the world, the man in the blue suit said as he walked up to the front of the room, with his hands placed behind his back. The rest of the world doesn't have to deal with aliens, and if they do, it's only through stories or myths. Maybe an unexplained encounter once, but nothing like what we've been through, the man added. Mr. Rivero, what makes you think a young man who has yet experienced any kind of work business related is ready to not only be the head of his company, but at the same time work alongside this intergalactic task force? The man with the scruffy beard questioned. Cesar looked at Mr. Rivero, who he knew as Raven Rivero, as the two locked eyes. Cesar glanced at the table, then back at Raven before taking a step back, letting his mentor take over. We need Cesar, as it wouldn't be the same without a Cabello at the top. Well, and Guillermo taught the boy everything there is to know about the company. More than me, from the manufacturing to the blueprints, Raven said. As for the other part of your argument, the plumbers aren't a task force. They're a peacekeeping presence that monitors our planet and keep extraterrestrial threats at bay. That same team wouldn't be a thing had it not been for your new boss saving our world, the man said, pointing to Cesar. We need both Cesar and C-10, because he's the best at what he does, Raven added. The room went silent, listening to every word Raven had to offer. We'll inform you on our decision in a few days or so, the bearded man replied. After the meeting, as all the attendants left the room, Cesar stood in his office that he hoped to be his in a few days. Staring out at the city below, he sighed, deciding what his next steps would be. There was a sudden knock at the door of his office. So that went well, Raven said, entering the room. Cesar shrugged. Could have been better. Thanks for the assist, by the way, he said, turning around. Don't worry about it. Trust me. They'll make the right decision, Raven replied. Cesar shrugged again. What even is the right decision? What do you think it is? Raven countered with another question. I think I need to carry on Guillermo's legacy. There's alien technology in those labs, and I need to protect it, Cesar replied. Kate then entered the office. Good, you're still here, she said, looking at Cesar, who stood beside the cracked window behind him. Kate? Raven greeted the plumber agent with a smile. Rivero? Kate responded, not looking at the man's direction as he approached Cesar. Oh, no, I was just gonna jump out the window, Cesar said in a joking manner. While those suits are basically discussing our future, we've got something else on our radar. She suddenly caught Cesar open the window at its widest before leaning on the glass wall as he activated the alien device attached to his wrist. What are you doing? Cesar looked up from his wrist, seeing Kate and Raven looking at him perplexed. Cesar looked back at him just as puzzled. What? I was serious about the window thing. He then pressed his watch down, selecting a creature and rewriting his DNA. Cesar shifted into a red humanoid manta ray-based alien with yellow wing flaps and horns. He had 2 black lightning marks from the back to his chest, where the watch symbol is located, with 3 fingers on each hand and 3 toes on both feet. He now also possessed a tail. Where are you going? Kate questioned as the alien climbed out the window. This is my company, right? The red creature said, looking back at them. Raven stepped forward. We have to plan. Cesar, in his manta ray-like form, cut the man off. I'm going on a break, Cesar said before jumping out the window and gliding away. Beneath the city streets of Puerto Carbonaro, beneath the manholes and past the pipes, rested an underground city that housed many creatures from big to small and many other shapes. There were tents that were for resting, stands with stocks of food or essentials from other worlds, and complexes that looked like they stretched to the surface. Cesar, with Jackie by his side, walked around the small grocery area with a bit of purpose in his walk. The creatures he passed by had seen humans down here before from time to time, but they immediately recognized the number 10 on the left side of his vest. Approaching a stand that had a worm-like alien with 6 arms and giant bug eyes standing behind it. Cesar looked up at the menu as Jackie stood up on her hind legs with her 2 front paws on the counter. "Can I get Mirai meat on a stick and tiffin fluff, please?" Cesar asked before taking out a few blue coins and placing them down on the counter. After taking the coins, the alien reached for the food items before handing them to its human customer. Cesar looked at the small plastic cup of ice cream-like substance. "This isn't real tiffin fluff, right?" he questioned. The worm creature shrugged. "Sure, kid," it responded. Awkwardly looking away, Cesar handed the meat on a stick to Jackie, who yanked the food away in her mouth and began gnawing on it before the two continued on their way. "I haven't been down here in months," Cesar said, looking up at the alien structures around him. "I wonder what's changed." Suddenly, he bumped into someone getting a bit of tiffin on his shirt. "You got a lot of nerve showing your face around here, boy," a deep, raspy, and threatening voice stated. As Jackie dropped her food and violently barked in response, Cesar looked up, seeing a muscular male being with a hulking figure and gray skin. He wore a black overall-like suit with red trim. The creature had white hair with a black streak going through, and an eye patch on his left eye. His right eye, however, was black with a red pupil, and he had 2 slits for a nose. "Dread. I'd say it's nice to see you, but we both know I'd be lying," Cesar said, slowly backing away from the 8-foot-tall alien. Dread grabbed Cesar by his shirt and yanked the human towards him. "Call your mud off," the alien said as Jackie continued to growl at him. Cesar turned his head to the right, slightly closing his eyes. "Call your breath off, dude." Dread threw Cesar back, causing the young man to drop his dessert and land on his rear. Dread grabbed the pole resting on his back, then retracted the object into a double-edged axe before swinging it in Cesar's direction. As the weapon curved in the air, Cesar ducked his head, closed his eyes tight, dodging the axe, then opened his eyes again to see Dread holding it firmly in his hands. "I never did get back at you for my eye," Dread said as Jackie stood next to Cesar defensively. "You did that to yourself. But if you want an eye, I know someone who's got plenty," Cesar said, lifting up his sleeve and activating his watch. "Remember Eye?" the boy asked before pressing his watch face down. In a flash of red, Cesar's body changed. He was now a creature that greatly resembled a mix between a grasshopper and a praying mantis, with significantly large 3-jointed hind limbs. He had a tan film connected to the tibia and tarsus of his legs, brown skin, a large segmented horn on the top of his head with small spikes, and 2 smaller horns on the sides of his head where his eyes were. "Locust?" Locust quickly stood up on his 2-toed feet before leaping backwards as Jackie kept her distance. Dread tossed his axe like a boomerang towards Locust, but the hero jumped into the air, dodging the attack as his companion bolted straight for their attacker. Opening her jaws wide, Jackie launched herself at Dread, chopping down his arm like a clamp, while Locust landed on the ground. Dread grunted in pain, feeling the canine's jaw strength increase, before waving his arm around, causing Jackie to release her grip as she was tossed to the side and then landed on her feet. That was a long enough distraction for Locust to run headfirst into Dread and knock him back. He then leapt into the air as Dread threw his axe towards him. Locust kicked the object, knocking the weapon off course and sending it straight to the ground before landing in front of it, and jumping up as high as he could before landing face first into the ground. Creatures big and small all formed a large crowd around the fight, while others shielded their businesses from the oncoming destruction. A large cloud of debris formed where Locust had landed as Jackie prowled around the fight, keeping her distance. Dread began to approach the spot where his opponent had landed, then started hearing the crackling noises of electricity. Cesar emerged from the smoke, running straight at Dread in another alien form. His appearance was of a thick, muscular Sasquatch-like alien. He had white, gray, and blue fur along the reddish-pink face, pointed eyebrows, and a lightning bolt-shaped horn on his head. With yellow eyes and black pupils, this alien also had a metallic gray circular bolt on the back of his hands, wearing the Multitrix symbol on his chest. The 2 aliens clashed with each other. Dread caught the two fists of the Sasquatch creature, and the two began to attempt to knock one another off their feet. Cesar suddenly let out a scream that resembled an ape's tantrum as lightning coursed from his fur and began electrocuting Dread. Dread let go of Cesar before taking a step back as his body began to emit smoke before falling over on his back unconscious while Jackie trotted over. "Ay, caramba," Cesar stated, his voice now heavy and raspy. Jackie let out a light rumbling noise and looked away in response of her owner's joke. "Ah, come on, that was funny, 'cause of the eye thing. No one enjoys my puns," Cesar replied before reverting from beast to boy. "I forget what I'm supposed to do with you guys after I beat you," Cesar wondered, as he hadn't been chasing down aliens in a while. "You hand him over to me." An Asian girl wearing all black standing said behind Cesar, from her dark lipstick to her boots. Cesar wasn't sure if she had enough heat on her, but what he was sure about was that this girl was his friend, Yuri Kang.